where facts come first and where news is done right. And today we sit down for an exclusive interview with FBI whistleblower Garret O'Boyle. As you remember, Garret came forward to testify in front of Congress back in May to reveal massive abuses of power inside the FBI and the retaliation he faced from speaking out. It was unbelievable. O'Boyle made protected disclosures to Congress, and then everything changed. For example, in September 2022, after he accepted a new role with the FBI halfway across the country in Virginia and moved his entire family, he says he was immediately suspended. He had his assets frozen and his family was essentially left homeless. Here's what he had to say back in May.
And how do you think that solves being able to shine light on corruption, weaponization, any kind of misconduct that exists with the American people?
It doesn't solve it, but the FBI will crush you. This government will crush you and your family if you try to expose the truth about things that they are doing that are wrong. And we are all examples of that.
I can't think of a more sobering way to end a hearing. I yield back.
And since he came forward to reveal how the Bureau is weaponizing resources against patriotic Americans, he's faced a wave of smears and been forced to confront an onslaught of attacks, all while the true bad actors avoid accountability. Because while John Durham's investigation into the Russia hoax uncovered massive FBI failures, there's still been very little to no real accountability for those that push the collusion lies on the American people. But what the Durham report does confirm is that the FBI failed to follow even the most basic investigative procedures in their sham Russia investigation that was all based on lies. Here's Congressman Tom McClintock at the hearing reminding us that all roads lead back to the phony Clinton-funded Steele dossier. Watch.
The Steele dossier was entered in the congressional record. Was it true?
I'm sorry, the Steele dossier?
The Steele dossier was entered into our congressional record. Was it true?
There is not a single substantive piece of information in the dossier that has ever been corroborated by the FBI or, to my knowledge, anyone else.
And while this may be the end of Durham's investigation, it ought to be just the beginning of a real reckoning for the bad actors inside our own government. And joining us now to explain more on all of this is the brave American whistleblower, former FBI Special Agent Garret O'Boyle. And we are so happy to have you back on the program with us.
Thanks for having me back. I really appreciate getting the opportunity to come back.
Well, it's our pleasure. And I've been really dying to get your reaction to all of this since there's been so many news developments and more information coming out, quite frankly, confirming everything that you've said and really just, demonstrating how extensive the corruption is. So first, I want to just kind of get your reaction, obviously, to the Durham testimony. Where do you think he got it right? And where do you think that they still haven't, really obtained the full picture?
Well, I think the pieces of his investigation, his report, and his testimony where he got it right are the areas that he focused on. Where he said this was the area of our investigation that we focused on, like the FBI corruption and the politicization of the Bureau, like Peter Strzok and Andy McCabe and James Comey and others who are involved. I think he really did a good job nailing down some of that. But some of the areas that I still have questions, I think a lot of Americans will have questions. For instance, Congressman Gates, I think he did a fantastic job really grilling John Durham. And it was refreshing to see because oftentimes it will be very partisan, where Republicans are, asking questions in a certain way or treating the witnesses in a certain way, and then the Democrats are doing the opposite to that. Where in this case, it was good to see Congressman Gates really nail down into John Durham about some of the areas that were left lacking. For instance, the pseudonym Azra Turk of what I believe to be an undercover FBI employee, or perhaps even an undercover from another agency. There's a lot of questions left to be answered. But overall, I think what John Durham and his team brought forth is a good starting point, but we have to keep digging. We have to keep going to get to the full truth. And also, as Congressman Gates and others alluded to in the hearing, nothing is happening to the people who have been wrong during this. They essentially engaged in a coup against the sitting president. I know it all started when President Trump was a presidential candidate, but it continued on into his presidency and for years and years and years. And that is an undermining of our government. And that's why we have to keep going and really hold these people accountable.
It's really true. It's very dangerous times we're living in that this is going on and has been going on for quite some time. So Jim Jordan also mentioned you specifically during the hearing. What is that like for you to find yourself at the center of all of this? Does it make you feel, empowered? Does it make you fearful at all? And what was the impact and kind of the reaction of your family?
It's a little bit of both, to be honest. So it was kind of surreal for me. So oddly enough, I was sitting in our garage in the rental house that we're in, and I was working on a lawnmower that is about 20 years old that I bought on Facebook Marketplace because I still don't have a paycheck. So
I can't believe it.
Right. We're we're making ends meet where we can. And so I'm working on this lawnmower and I have the hearing playing and I hear my name mentioned and I was like, oh my gosh, my name again now in the congressional record. And I was grateful that he mentioned me and that it's at the forefront of his thoughts and of what the Judiciary Committee and the subcommittee on weaponization are doing, because I think whistleblowers play an important role. But it does also leave me with some fear because I know that the FBI and the Democrats are out to attack me even more.
It's really true. And that's the thing. I mean, there's a focus and kind of a spotlight, but I hope that eventually that works out to your advantage. And I believe that it will. I believe because you did the right thing, God sees everything, that there will be a very bright future for you and for your family. I'm praying on that. But I think that story that you just told really hits home that, you're going on Facebook Marketplace to be able to get, a lawnmower because you still don't have a paycheck because of what these people did to you.
Right.
But there will be justice in this, believe me. And I know when we last, spoke, you talked about how the FBI really has a flawed incentive structure. And I think this is a very key, important point. Can you refresh our memory and let the viewers know about how that all works? Because people sit at home and they say, how is this happening? These are supposed to be the good guys, the white hats. How is it that the very agency is essentially incentivizing people to politicize and weaponize, against patriotic Americans?
Right. So as a refresher for that, the FBI has a system called Integrated Program Management, or IPM. And in reality, it's basically pre-crime or thought crime. So at the end or near the end of every fiscal year, the FBI's IPM system gets regurgitated. And at the field level, it's called the FOSP, Field Office Strategic Plan. So every field office has one. That is basically the local level version of IPM. So in the beginning of the year, every field office they come up with what they call program measures. So for counterterrorism or counterintelligence or domestic terrorism or regular criminal enterprise activities or whatever the case may be, there's many categories. So what the FBI does is they decide ahead of time in the beginning of the year, how many arrests in this program they're going to make, or how many different activities in this other program that they're going to do, or whatever the case may be. And an SAC, a special agent in charge, or at the larger field offices, and an assistant director who would be in charge of that field office, they're incentivized to really meet those metrics because they make a monetary bonus at the end of the year if they get the highest ratings in the IPM structure. And since last time, I learned from someone who was very familiar with how that incentive system is doled out at the end of the year. And that person told me that they had never seen a check to an SAC for less than $30,000. So on top of their SES salary that they're making, they make a minimum of $30,000 extra a year based off of sometimes fabricating crime, or in the instance with the Russia collusion hoax, in that case, I think a lot of the top leaders, and I think it's been proven by now, if you don't believe me, go and read the Durham report, because I know there are people out there who still don't believe this, but the FBI's leadership, which I use that word very loosely, they were politically motivated to stop the Trump campaign and the Trump presidency. And if we're living in a nation where that's the case, that's a banana republic, plain and simple.
I mean, literally, it's like I don't know, like a bribe or something where they're giving you money to actually commit crimes, but you're supposed to be the agency investigating and bringing justice for the American people. And instead, you're getting a bonus. $30,000 is a lot of money.
Right. It's a
right?
lot. Yep.
A lot. It's a lot of money. And how many lawnmowers would that be? You know what I'm saying?
A lot. And I could buy a new one easily.
A new one on Amazon, Prime delivery, get it in 2 days, whatever, Home Depot. That's outrageous. I mean, that should offend every American that is listening and hears this information, because it is unbelievable that we would do this to our own citizens. It's insane, and rewarding and incentivizing people to essentially lie and cheat. I mean, that's like stealing money from the American taxpayers to commit crimes. I mean, why don't go down the street and then loot and steal at the Louis Vuitton store? It's basically the same thing. I'm not even kidding you.
Right.
Right.
I
so
agree.
yeah. And so Durham says that FBI agents apologized to him for failing to follow basic procedure and for their handling of the Trump-Russia probe.
Right.
But sorry isn't good enough. Correct?
I agree. So that part of his testimony, and I want to extend a little bit of grace to those retired agents and those current agents that he mentioned, and even to him, like, okay, we understand you all see it, but speaking behind closed doors to Mr. Durham or whoever else or his team, it's not going to cut it. And I get it too. They see me and they see Steve Friend and Kyle Seraphin and others who we get suspended, we get our pay cut, we get treated as basically as if we're the criminals. So I understand they don't want to come forward because they fear the retaliation. But if you want a true land of the free, you have to come forward. If you know that information, if you know Crossfire Hurricane, if you're working on a case like that, you must come forward. You must come to Congress, go through the right channels to whistleblow, because whispering behind closed doors, it's not going to cut it. Nothing's going to change that way.
Yeah. It's interesting because you're right. They see the punishment and the retribution that brave individuals like yourself, have faced. And they say, I don't want that to happen to me or to my family. I totally get it. But that's why everyone has to be united in their belief and desire to actually do something to root out the corruption in the FBI. We hear a lot about the seventh floor. Talk to the folks for a second about that.
Sure. So that's a point I make often, is the seventh floor. So when FBI personnel or former FBI personnel or people in know mention the seventh floor, that's of the Hoover Building, which is the FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. And that is really the seat of power. That's where Director Wray or any FBI director and all the assistant directors and people who rose through the ranks together and, climbed over many other people's backs to get to the positions that they're in. That's where they collude. To be honest, I mean, I wish I could say I hate to use that word, but based on a lot of the information coming out of the on the FBI, like Russiagate, like the Durham report, like what's happening to whistleblowers, and there are many other examples as well. Mm-hmm. That's where they all get together and plot and scheme to really run the FBI in the wrong direction. Because many people like myself, when I was an agent, or many others who are still in the FBI, they are trying to do the right thing. They are trying to uphold their oath. And then they're too afraid to speak out when they see something wrong, because they know that those people who in the FBI, we call them blue flames or blue flamers. They are the ones who only are seeking to gain more power, more control, and seek more promotions. And those are the ones who eventually end up on the seventh floor. And then we get an FBI like this, because that's the, the head of the snake, so to speak. So they are in the seat of power in DC, and they like that type of living. They like that style of notoriety and power. And then that trickles down to the field offices. And we get a law enforcement agency like we see today that many Americans no longer trust.
Yeah, this is the problem. I mean, it is just remarkably different, the public perception and opinion about the FBI now when we know, what's going on. But, they did it to themselves, the top, leadership and management there. I mean, it starts at the top. So you got to cut the head off of the snake. I mean, God willing, President Trump gets in 2024, there needs to be some serious, revamping and removal of people who have committed essentially these crimes against American citizens. And it's outrageous. There has to be some accountability. So Durham also suggested in the testimony that the FBI made, significant reforms, but I'm not sure many Americans would agree with that. And in fact, many Americans seem to think that the Bureau is beyond reform. What is your reaction?
Right. So that talking point coming from the FBI or even from the Democrat side that they already made the reforms and they already implemented changes to quote unquote fix the problems with the Crossfire Hurricane investigation, it's a complete misnomer. So I was still an active FBI agent when these quote unquote fixes were implemented.
Exactly.
And it came, right. And it came by way of virtual academy. So in the FBI, there's a system of digital training. And there are a number of mandatory trainings that come out every year. And you can go in there on your own and seek additional training on your own if you want on various topics. But one of them that came out was mandatory. It was regarding the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. It was essentially a slide deck pointing out some of what came out of the Inspector General's report. But again, all you got to do is click through and maybe answer a couple questions, and then you're quote unquote trained, and the FBI expects nothing like that to ever happen again. But what it really boils down to is a matter of integrity. The FBI loves to beat the drum of fidelity, bravery, and integrity. But again, the people who are running that investigation, and oftentimes the people sitting in the 7th floor and trying to rise through the ranks, they don't have any integrity. And that's why something like the Crossfire Hurricane investigation happens. They have ulterior motives. They don't care about the constitutional rights of somebody like President Trump, which if they're not going to care about a presidential candidate or a president's constitutional rights, why would they care about yours or mine?
Exactly. It's really true. And I think that's what people are starting to process and actually understand, and comprehend it. Talk a little bit about how an investigation is actually supposed to be properly handled and opened, and what protocols you saw being broken and disregarded that led you to speak out.
Right. So I'll just focus on the Crossfire Hurricane investigation because in my testimony, Dan Goldman tried to trip me up, and he was alluding to how a preliminary investigation and a full investigation aren't really that big of a difference. And because of timing and certain things like that, that it was okay for the FBI to open a full investigation. And he said something like, oftentimes preliminary investigations are just open as full investigations. Mm-hmm. And I said, oftentimes they're just closed. And I would say more often than not, at least in my experience, if I had something that resulted in a preliminary investigation, the vast majority of the time, those were closed down. They were not escalated to a full investigation. And then now, since we've had John Durham's testimony, he alluded to the same thing, that the FBI incorrectly opened a full investigation when they should have at best opened a preliminary investigation. So the difference there is a full investigation opens basically the whole toolbox of the FBI. So you can pursue any type of technique that you want with the full investigation, where a preliminary investigation, it's a lot more limited. And on top of that, at Durham's testimony, they talked about confirmation bias and how the FBI or those involved with the Russia collusion case, they simply leaned into their confirmation bias instead of doing what any investigator should do. This is stuff you learn day one in a criminal law class or at the academy in Quantico. You don't simply cast away the information you learned that you don't like because in this case, the FBI was pursuing an outcome, and that is atrocious. That is not what law enforcement is about. That is not, especially in a constitutional republic like we have. You are supposed to balance your law enforcement activity with the constitutional rights of others. So people involved with this case, they were getting information that was directly contradicting what they wanted to happen. So they just were discarding it. And right. If it's happening at the top levels like that, it really makes you wonder what's happening across the country at regular field offices. And especially when you bring back that IPM structure and the bonuses, the pressure on a low-level agent when his boss or his boss's boss is trying to get them to do something a certain way, it really should be an alarm bell for anybody who's paying attention to what's happening with the FBI.
It's really true. Yeah. What I think is so troubling, to so many Americans is you don't really ever hear, right, Director Wray or anyone else in a position of authority or management unequivocally say, we messed up, we got it wrong, or we need to do better, we need to have reforms, etc. What is it about the Bureau that creates this environment of being above reproach, above accountability?
Right. So I think it really boils down to hubris. And that's the best way I have come up with to describe it, because you see it so often, like you just said. And I mean, we could make a giant list of people: Wray, Comey, Strzok, like Kleinsmith. I mean, the guy altered an email to get a FISA renewal, and now he's practicing law in Washington, D.C. again. Like, the hubris of these people knows no bounds. And on top of that, it's the way that people are promoted in the FBI. It's really a self-selecting system for the type of people who most often shouldn't be promoted, but they're the ones who seek it. So they go on various 18-month temporary duty assignments to Washington, D.C., and they leave their family behind to wherever they came from. And a lot of people don't seek to do those things because they don't want to deal with an 18-month TDY to Washington, D.C. So then you have like the good investigator type of agents who they literally stay an agent for 20 or 25 years and never promote. And they probably should have, because they would have been a better leader with more integrity. And then it's just the people who are seeking that power and that glory and that prestige who end up promoting. And I think that plays a major role as well.
Yeah, it's so disappointing. I mean, this is supposed to be the best of the best. And the people that you said, like, have that, fidelity, that bravery, integrity, that you're supposed to have those goals, and you should have it, lead by example at the top. And we've seen the worst at the top. This is the problem. So, and then people see it in the rank and file. They go, oh, well, this guy made it all the way to the top. He got promoted. I'm going to do what this guy does. And then, this is just like a whole self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yes.
You joined the FBI because you felt a calling and a patriotic duty to do so. You've got a very interesting and background of service to this country. And I know that you were also deeply guided by your faith. And quite frankly, I think that's, the difference between you and some of the others, besides your bravery and integrity and fidelity that you have and embody, that you are guided by your principles of faith and religion. How have you grappled with being attacked by the same Bureau that you sacrificed for and that so many Americans once held in such high regard?
Right. So I do lean into my faith. And one primary section of scripture for this particular topic that I have been leaning in a lot, it's in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 12. I probably won't get it exactly right, but it says something to the effect of, for all who seek to abide in Christ will be persecuted. So I know a lot of people are like, oh, persecution, that's a heavy word. And okay, yeah, like, I'm not being sent off to a gulag yet, at least. But when my name is being slandered, or my career is being taken from me, or my pay, or my family having their belongings withheld from them, because I think I mentioned last time, for me, the cornerstone of even why I came forward was because of my faith. Because I can't properly pray or sleep at night or seek God if I know I'm doing something wrong. So if I'm coming across something that is wrong in the FBI or wherever I might work, maybe it's Target, or maybe it's Anheuser-Busch with some of the things that they've been doing. It doesn't really matter where you are. You have to stand firm. You know, Ephesians chapter 6 is where it talks about putting on the full armor of God. And my primary takeaway from there is standing firm. And if I can't stand firm in the faith, how can I raise my daughters, or how can I be an example to my wife to say, hey, we're Bible believing Christians, and this is number one. We have to do what Christ commands first. And if our government or anyone is trying to steer us in a direction that causes us to violate what we know is true from the Bible, we simply can't do that. And, you know, I say simply, it may be simple in principle, because I think a lot of people would say, well, yeah, I wouldn't violate my principles either. But then I would ask, well, where are all the other FBI agents or whatever agency? Where are they?
Right.
Well, why aren't they standing up? Because it's easier said than done.
Oh, it really is. And it takes a strong personal conviction. And I think just, yes, understanding the Bible and understanding, living the truth, you know, in accordance with your beliefs and your religious faith. It just made me think of something. So, you know, in New York, I don't know if you saw this case, but there was a Navy, I think it was a Navy veteran that, was on the subway. And he saw the guy came on, he was crazy, said he's going to kill somebody, doesn't care if he goes to jail, blah, 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 blah. And everyone was afraid. So he jumped in to protect and try to subdue this guy, right? With other people actually helping to hold the guy down to get the guy so he wouldn't hurt or kill someone. And we've seen all the crimes on the subway. Now he's being prosecuted for criminally negligent homicide and manslaughter, and could, you know, go to jail and spend a long time in jail when he was just trying to step up and do the right thing. You mentioned, like, whether you're in the FBI or whether you see something happen in Target. I mean, I think you would probably have done the same thing.
Right. I absolutely would have. So another duty of mine that I had in the FBI was that of defensive tactics instructor. So I have a little bit more experience. And then also when I was in the Army, I went through the Army combatives program, and I'm assuming that he had gone through a similar program in the Navy or somehow had some additional training, because what he tried to do to that guy who was acting crazy was put him in, in the UFC, they call it a rear naked choke, or in the FBI, we call it a carotid restraint. So he tries to subdue him, no intent to harm, to hurt the guy, because if you apply that properly, the person doesn't get hurt. They do fall asleep, and then you can subdue them properly. And then, like you said, there were bystanders trying to help. And then even once the guy was subdued, they were congratulating this veteran and were thanking him for what he did, because they all had a reasonable belief that guy was going to extract
I hope
violence.
he gets all of those people to call as witnesses in his defense, because this is outrageous. And it just upsets me to no end when I see these type of things happening in this country and on our streets, and insane crime. It's like, you know, the victims are now being persecuted and prosecuted. You know, that DA, Alvin Bragg, is just a real winner in New York. You know, it's just, it's awful. And we had a good one, Morgenthau before that, but here you go. What's the character of the leadership at the FBI?
I think it's rotten. It's people who are attracted to power for the wrong reasons. I think there's no other conclusion I can draw from that other than they are actually weak men masquerading as strong men and women. And you give them that power, and in actuality, they're really weak. And so they love the power so much. They only care about controlling you and me and everybody else. They just want to keep us under their thumb. And in America, I mean, sorry, that doesn't work. This is the land of the free. We all have to stand up to keep it that way.
Absolutely. Without a doubt, you know, and with the help and grace of God, we can prevail. So, you know, quite frankly, without, you know, whistleblowers like yourself, brave Americans, patriotic Americans coming forward, we'd never learn the full extent of these abuses of power. And so I thank you and I commend you for that and for your service, because that is an additional service to this country that you've done, and that we were able to have these congressional hearings and get to the truth. Because imagine how many other lives would be impacted and or, destroyed because of what they were doing there with that incredible power that the FBI has. I mean, it's just frightening, to think about. But I know so many of our viewers, they care about you. They care about your family, and they appreciate what you've done. And we all want to know, kind of what are your, future plans? If you have any that you would like to share, or even dreams about what you think you would like to do after everything you've been through, what you've learned, what you've experienced, and you have obviously a considerable, resume and background, with so much ability. What do you think? What is in store for Garret O'Boyle in the future, and the role that you see for yourself?
I don't know. I think last time I gave you a similar answer. I don't really know. For now, I want to continue to shine a light on the FBI's corruption as best as I can. I want to continue being able to speak about my faith. That's very important to me. And as long as we have a First Amendment, we have to speak about these things, no matter what. And even if they take that right away, we have to continue to speak, because, like I said about my faith, I'm going to be held accountable to God on Judgment Day. And so that is probably my primary focus. And as far as a job or something like that, I've had a couple offers, but nothing that's really like popping to me to like take. And then on top of it, I'm still technically an FBI employee, so I would have to get their permission to work outside of the FBI anyways, which I know they're not likely to approve. So for now, we're still taking it one day at a time, trying to find that path that the Lord has established. After my hearing in May, it has been such a whirlwind of support, and now doing interviews like this with you, and so I don't know where it will all lead. And I also, I'm still kind of in mourning over, I don't anticipate being rehired or brought back by the FBI. And I honestly don't know if I could go back at this point.
Well, if Trump gets in.
yeah, maybe. But I don't know what somebody like me does.
I'll be a reference for you.
Yeah. Oh, thanks. Yeah. But I was in the Army for 6 years as an infantryman, deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan. Then I was a cop for 4 years. Then I was FBI for 4 years. 2 of those years I was FBI SWAT. I don't know what I do next. I don't know. I wish I had a better answer for you, but I don't know. I don't foresee myself going back into law enforcement. A lot of people have said to me, "Oh, you have to though. You have to. We need people like you." Yeah, I understand, but I don't know. I think God might have shifted his calling for my life into something else, and I just don't know what that is yet.
Well, I'm excited to follow the future with you, and we're going to be with you all through it. So you've got a great friend and supporter, and me and our viewers, and so we want to follow the path and the journey for the next chapters for Garret O'Boyle and your family. And I truly, again, want to say thank you for everything that you've done for this country and your bravery. And God bless to your family. And we're going to have much more to come on all of this, Garret. But first, I want to make sure I thank our brave sponsors who make this show possible. Goldco. Like the great folks over at Goldco, gold and silver can protect your retirement savings from inflation and dollar devaluation. Look, we see all the economic warning signs. We see banks collapsing. We see reckless spending. And I want you to be ready, because I'm ready. With Goldco, you can take action to secure and stabilize your portfolio. Roll over your 401k or IRA into precious metals and safeguard your savings tax and penalty free. From precious metals, IRAs to direct purchases of gold and silver, Goldco has helped thousands of Americans place over $2 billion in gold and silver. And when you open up a qualifying gold IRA today, get up to $10,000 in free silver. Go to kimsmetals.com to learn more. That's kimsmetals.com. And I also want to bring you a message from Patriot Lifestyle, where you can save more and spend less on a whole host of different benefits from. And now we continue with Garret for part 2 of our interview, where we learn more about his background and why he wanted to be an FBI agent in the first place. Take a look. Tell us, how did you become an agent, and what was the thought process in getting involved with the agency to begin with?
So it was a long road. It was really a pipe dream early on. It was near the end of high school that I decided I wanted to go into law enforcement. And it all really started after 9/11. I was a freshman in high school back then. And then fast forward a little bit, and I end up joining the Army after high school and enlisted in the infantry. 2 deployments, 6 years total. And after that, I went back to school, and shortly after that became a police officer. And while I was a cop, I finished my bachelor's degree and decided, because the FBI, it was one of these, Mount Everest type goals for anybody in the law enforcement field. And I decided, you know what, I have my bachelor's degree, I have all the credentials anyone could need to attempt to become a special agent. So I decided to apply, and it took about a year to get through the hiring process, and I shockingly was hired. And the idea behind it for me was that it has been, held up as this pinnacle, this beacon of fidelity, bravery, and integrity in an institution that is supposed to do the right thing in the right way, as the director likes to say. And so it was for a lot of those reasons, and of course, an innate desire to continue to serve my country, that led me on that long journey, that long road to becoming a special agent.
You had these, idealistic in a really good way, expectations and about wanting to continue to serve, your country as you did as, veteran and military law enforcement. How different was the expectation and the aspiration of what you had versus the reality of what you endured?
So especially now, it's a sad reality to see what the FBI has become, how instead of saying, hey, you know what, you have some valid points here about some of the things we're doing, they look at you as the enemy and they seek to destroy your life. I'm one example of many. There are many other whistleblowers who have been placed on a similar path. And in law enforcement, that's a body of evidence. That's not a coincidence. There are no coincidences when it comes to investigating crime. You have to take every piece of evidence and look at the totality of it. And in this era that we're living in, when you look at the totality of the circumstances regarding all of us whistleblowers, there's a huge body of evidence that retaliation is occurring.
Absolutely. It was such compelling, testimony that you gave in front of Congress, and as you see, it's been, played out over the media. One of the clips, that we played here. It had to take a tremendous amount of, reflection and courage to be able to come forward. Can you lay out for us what prompted you to choose to speak out?
Honestly, for me, it boils down to my faith. So, of course, I'm loyal to this country. I've swore that oath to the Constitution twice in the military, because I re-enlisted one time, then as a police officer, and then when I was sworn in as an FBI agent. I take that oath very seriously, and I thought everyone else did as well. But my faith in Christ on top of it is what really led me down this path, to see things that were wrong. And after I was suspended, the FBI gave me what they would call an opportunity to appeal their decision, and it was in written format. And one of the pieces I wrote in there comes from James 4 verses 17, which says, for the person who knows the right thing to do and doesn't do it, for him it is sin. And that really was the crux of it for me. And I couldn't go on knowingly seeing these things that were wrong inside the agency and just allowing them to continue when I knew that they were wrong. So I started making protected disclosures, and I really thought that I was going to be protected as federal law provides. Obviously, that hasn't been the case.
Very disappointing, but obviously, I see a very familiar, important theme is strength in Christ and your religious beliefs that guide you as a moral compass to do the right thing and have the courage in the face of great, adversity. So upon reflection, Garret, what did you see inside the FBI that really shocked your conscience?
Kimberly, you started the segment with that Dobbs decision, that threat tag, that this is another interesting piece. So when I went to Washington, D.C. for my deposition back in February, I went there in good faith under the belief that it was confidential. And I was even told, don't talk about this with anybody unless it's a privileged party like your lawyer or your
Right.
wife or somebody in clergy. And I believe that that was going to be what happened. But similarly, as in the FBI, where I thought I was going to be protected for being a whistleblower, part of my closed door deposition testimony ended up being leaked and twisted and distorted as a further part of the weaponization of government against the American people. But that Dobbs decision threat tag, my first line supervisor was the first person who brought that to my attention. He brought it to my entire squad's attention, and he knew it was wrong. And he's the one who mentioned it and how the FBI was using that threat tag to target pro-life people instead of people who were actually targeting Supreme Court members. And so that's one of a number of things that has come out. And, it goes back to that point of seeing wrong inside the agency. My belief as an American and as an FBI agent, I thought if I was just a normal citizen, what would I want my FBI agents to do? Because I believe that FBI agents belong to the American people. And I thought I just would want them to do the right thing. And in an instance like that, when you see something that is clearly wrong, you have to make it known. Well, my supervisor wasn't willing to make it known, but I was. So I took it to Congress, and, it helped that, among other things, put me on this path where the FBI is now seeking to continue to destroy me and smear my name and, my family's life as well.
But I want to talk about you and your family, because when a man like yourself chooses to serve and chooses to serve again, and as you have in military and law enforcement, and then again re-upping it with the FBI, there is a family that makes that decision together, and there is a family that bears the burden and the toll of that service and of that dedication and that choice. Talk to us about the toll this has taken on your family, and how bad has this retaliation been?
It's been a tremendous toll. My wife and I have talked a lot over the last 8 months. And, like I said earlier, I deployed to Iraq for a year. I went to Afghanistan for a year. I mentioned it in my testimony. I'm a recipient of the Combat Infantryman's Badge. When I got back from Afghanistan, I thought the hardest time of my life was over. And because I knew at that point that I would be leaving the military. I had about 10, 11 months left. And so I really did think that I had done the hardest things I would ever do. And this time of life is harder. I know I'm not getting shot at anymore or anything like that. But I didn't swear that oath to have the government destroy my family. I touched on it in my testimony. I don't really care what they do to me. I've made that oath. I've made that commitment in my mind that if I have to sacrifice my life for this country, I will. As a husband, the Bible commands me to love my wife as Christ loved the church. And Christ loved the church so much that he gave up his life for it. He was crucified for it. And I'm willing to do that for this country. I'm willing to die for my family. But I am not willing to see their lives and their dreams and their hopes destroyed by a weaponized government who is just simply seeking to silence dissent.
Absolutely. I think, your belief in Christ and love of your family, being such an honorable man, has really helped you, get through this. And, when you take a step back, Garret, and you try and digest this moment and absorb it and process the moment you're in, is there a sense, what are the emotions going on with you? Is it anxiety? Is it fear? Is it also a sense of, empowerment for what you're doing and for standing up, for the country, for the citizens in this moment of time? And what does it all mean to you?
So there is a lot of anxiety and a lot of fear. I really think that now that I testified publicly, I really think that the FBI is only going to increase the pressure to completely rid themselves of me. And I really think that that will be the case for anyone who has similar beliefs and a similar stance on where that agency should be heading. But that being said, I can only move forward. I didn't want this. I just wanted to serve my country and catch bad guys. And, I never could have imagined in a million years that I would be testifying before Congress. I would have videos on YouTube and doing interviews with people like you. But I guess I'm also grateful for this opportunity because, like I said in my opening statement, here am I, send me. I've made that oath many times. I have to make that oath again. It's the only way. And I hope it encourages other people inside the FBI who are seeing the same type of things that I saw and that other whistleblowers saw. I hope they can see an interview like this and say, you know what? I have to stand up too. It's the only way to save our agency. It's the only way to save our country. And I truly believe that.
And save our souls.
Absolutely.
So if FBI Director Christopher Wray was sitting right here with you, what would you tell him or what would you ask him?
I would ask him why. Why has he allowed the agency to spiral into this death knell of weaponization against its own employees, against people the agency claims to protect? They're supposed to protect whistleblowers by the law. Part of the FBI's mission statement is to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Well, there are ratified laws to protect whistleblowers, and the FBI refuses to protect us. So I'd just ask him why he's allowing that to happen. And I honestly would really like to have a candid conversation with him to get to the bottom of it, because to me, it doesn't make any sense. In any organization, especially one like the FBI that is the pinnacle of law enforcement in the entire world, they should want to get better and improve. But it seems like they just want to brush it under the rug and say, there's nothing to see here. We're doing everything just right. And that's not how anybody is going to get better.
Well, God bless you, former Special Agent Garret Guilfoyle, for your bravery and your service to this country. You're an inspiration, and you've been a great leader to so many, and I hope others can take some courage, from your position and what you've been able to do and using your voice in such a positive way. That is truly a gift that you've given so many people that have been able to listen to you and to hear your testimony and see your path. So thank you so much. These stories are so important to spotlight. Without the support from American patriots like you, convincing more whistleblowers to come forward becomes that much more challenging. And remember, it's all of you who make this show possible, along with our amazing sponsors. That's why I'm so excited to tell you about MyPillow 2.0, because the best pillow, that's right, is getting even better. Equipped with a brand new temperature regulating technology, it will keep you comfortable throughout the night. And as Mike Lindell has been telling you, the patented interlocking fill allows you to adjust your MyPillow to your individual needs. So it's going to give the exact support that you need from the bed to your head, and it's going to stay that way throughout the entire night. Okay, it's nothing good about getting woken up by a bad pillow, if you get my point. And you can buy one and get one free with promo code Kimberly at mypillow.com, along with discounts on all of your favorite MyPillow products. That's mypillow.com/Kimberly. And in closing, as the quest for accountability and equal justice becomes more and more imperative, it's vital to shed light on the stories of those who are willing to step into the spotlight. And as I've said, change doesn't always happen naturally. It rarely comes smoothly. The status quo doesn't change overnight, and the bureaucratic inertia inside the swamp pushes back every step of the way. And it's why we must never yield in our demands for accountability and justice. And it will continue to be a major theme of this show, where we reject the false narrative and we always seek the truth. So be sure to like and subscribe to my channel at Kimberly Guilfoyle and turn on notifications. Download the Rumble app, hit the like button, and tell all your friends so they know exactly where to find us. And also be sure to follow me and Don Jr. across all platforms: Twitter, Truth Social, Facebook, and Instagram. Thank you so very much for tuning in right here on Rumble, where we'll see you every Monday and